Hey there, YouTube. Thanks for coming back. So I've been doing some stuff recently, and I was down at my local vape shop, and I was doing a couple coils for a couple guys. And here's the thing. I want to talk about battery safety today. I figured I'd do so while trying to mess with this new camera, trying to get everything squared away. So let's go ahead and figure out what I'm going to do. So this is going to pertain more to the newer vapors out there, guys first getting into Mech mods, or going from like an ego style to something else, something a little bit bigger, something more. So I've been looking at a lot of things, and I got some hammered emails in regards to the comment I made about the IPv3 and me thinking the Clopper T8 was a little more safe due to the amp limits and stuff. Now, I'm not trying to bash Pioneer for You and the IPv3. I think in theory it could be a good device. But I just think that somebody that's not going to be as experienced, this is going to be a little bit safer for them. Now, I'm going to go ahead and take a vape. I think you guys should too. So, okay, battery safety. You've got several different types of batteries and different sizes, and your mods are different. So the real common ones are going to be like your 18350s, your 18650s, your 26650s. And that all refers to just the size of the battery. There's something you need to look at. Your limits of the battery. Your limits on the battery are going to be your amperage limits. Now, something that newer people should do, and I really think would be helpful, is if you familiarize yourself with Ohm's law. Ohm's law is just a mathematical equation to figure out electrical current, wattage, power, and resistance. So as long as you know two factors that you need, you'll be able to figure out the rest of it. Now, you don't have to know the mathematical equation, and you don't have to be good at math to use this. There are several different types of apps, whether they be for Android, iPhone, or even on the computer over the internet, where you can just type it in and do it for free. You don't have to pay for these. And this is something that I really suggest people familiarize themselves with, especially when getting into high wattage mods or box mods and Mech mods, because a Mech mod, in theory, all it is a tube. You have a connection up here that has an insulator around it for your Addy to sit on and make connection. Now, your negative connection on the Addy is the outside of this, because it's the outside of your Addy on the deck. So this, in theory, is a battery tube with a contact on your positive that usually your battery will sit on this and make contact with the positive. Now, you have a button down here, which is another contact, and you hit the button, and when you hit that button, it will make a complete circuit. When you make that complete circuit, the electricity starts going. There's no safety. There's nothing to that. That's why it's called mechanical. You are the only safety to that device. So for someone getting out, there was a guy that came into the shop the other day, and he was talking, and he has a friend who has a Mech mod and some kind of setup with an Addy. I'm not sure exactly what it was, but he came in and he said he was an occasional smoker. He didn't smoke a lot, but he was interested in vaping. He tried his friends and he really liked it. He liked the flavor of the juice, and he just liked everything about it, which, dude, kudos to you. That's awesome. You know, even if you're just a hobbyist vapor because you never smoked, hey, cool. So when you look at all these batteries and you look at safety, there's been so many concerns about safety that with all these different reviewers out there, safety seems to be a big topic, and people are like, well, what does safety mean? You know, I was talking to somebody, and like this guy, he had no clue. I mean, if he shorts out an Addy or something like that, he has no way of knowing what he needs to do to prevent these steps. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to quickly go over some basic tips and try to help out some of these people. Now, something I do not recommend for a new vapor or somebody just going from an ego style is going to be one of these high wattage box mods. Your IPv3, your Clopper T8s, your God mods, I even believe the Sigelli. So you start getting into that and you start pushing limits in batteries. Now, in theory, those chips, they're said they're regulated, but are they really regulated to where they're not going to draw the current out of that battery and they're actually checking that battery? See, I don't know. I'm not an engineer for computer electronics, so I don't know if that chip really says, oh wait, that battery is only really showing, you know, whatever it does to only pull so many amps. So let's go over Ohm's law. And you'll hear a lot of people say that, and like I said, it's just a mathematical equation, no big deal. I have an app on my phone. It was a free app, so as you can see, it just pulls up here. I don't know if it'll focus for you guys. Yeah, it kind of focuses, but it gives me the blanks. Now, if I fill in 2 of those, it will tell me what I want. So let's just say I'm a vapor and I want a Mech mod, and everybody starts talking about sub-ohms. Let's do a 0.5 build, because you can buy the new Aspire Atlantis tank that's a 0.5 ohm build. And that's coming from a factory. So I plug in 0.5 ohms on my resistance and my voltage. So here's the thing, guys. You're going to hear a lot of people talk about voltage under load and all that. What that means in theory is that your addy or your atomizer or your clearomizer under the Aspire Atlantis section is only going to pull so much under load. So that battery's under load and it's putting out. So that means that your voltage drop and all that, where it's regulated, or not regulated, but where it's going to be at and where you're going to get that load is at that coil. Your battery is still making contact to make the 4.2 volts on a Mech mod, on a fully charged battery. So if I do 4.2 volts, I'm running, so here it is, 4.2 volts. Current is going to be 8.4 amps. Resistance is going to be 0.5. We plug that in. And power, or my wattage, the heat, is going to be 35.27999 watts. So roughly 35 watts. Okay. So the biggest thing that I look at here is going to be the current, my amperage, because that's the battery's limits. That's how quickly that battery can drain safely from charges. There are several batteries out there that are 20 amp limits. You have other batteries boasting higher amp limits. Now, I know Sony's, they're hard to get, but they were a 30 amp limit continuous drain. So continuous drain, guys, means it will drain from 4.2 volts all the way down to full drain continuously at 30 amps, and by the factory standards it should be safe. It's not going to vent. But then you've got like the Panasonics. The Panasonics have like a 10 amp drain rate. The 10 amp drain I use for my DNA 30 because it'll fire down to a 0.3. It'll fire up to 30 watts. So when I put that battery in there and I do the equation at max wattage at the lowest resistance, because the lower the resistance, the more amperage it'll take to run. So when I plug that equation in, I come up with a 10 amp limit. So yeah, I'm pushing that amperage limit. But if I were to stick those Panasonics into this, and I've only got a 10 amp limit, and I bump this thing up on a 0.38 ohm build, going to 150 watts, I'm running 49, or I'm running 19 point something, to where it's going to be the almost max capacity of a 20 amp limit on this. Those batteries will not handle that. I cannot put those batteries in there and safely vape at a high wattage. I cannot put those batteries in this and vape at a 0.2. It just isn't, in theory, a good idea. Now, anything below, because you have internal resistance of a battery and everything else, not completely familiar. Well, I'm familiar with it, but I'm not so sure that I want to spout off stuff because of it. But you've got internal resistance and all this other crap that goes along with the battery. So you guys don't necessarily have to know that, but I'm going to get into where you should build your coils. Now, they say you should give yourself a plus or minus 0.2 ohm limit for resistance on a battery to consider a dead short. Dead short means it just shorts right there on the battery. So in theory, you really shouldn't build lower than a 0.2 own build. Now I know there's a lot of guys out there, and I've said it in other videos, I don't recommend going any lower than that. Actually, on a mech mod, you should try to keep it no lower than a 0.3 ohm. But that's just my personal safety that I try to preach if I'm down at the shop and I'm talking to people down there when I'm hanging out, and that's where I'm at, and they'll come in and do different things, or they're talking, especially new guys. Look, don't go below a 0.3. Please, please, please. Get yourself a multimeter. You can get a cheap one. You can pick these up at, you know, your discount stores or whatever for $5-6, sometimes even cheaper, for measuring battery current, because they're fairly accurate for battery current, and that's fine. These work just fine. You can pick one up cheap. If you're going to have a mech mod, get one. They're not that expensive. Add that into your cost of your vaping budget. Again, I think I spent like $3 on that one just to test the batteries for my vaping stuff. Now, when it comes to testing your atomizers for resistance, they make those cool little ones that got the 510, you screw it on. No, you need to understand, electricians, when they test all this kind of stuff and they do all this kind of stuff as a living, when they're putting wiring in and all that kind of crap, they spend in upwards of $500 or $600 for a meter, kind of like that, but it's going to be accurate. And even those have a plus or minus like 0.1 on their ohms for resistance. So do you really want to trust something, and I'm not going to even say Chinese made, because that can be anything made, something that's going to cost you, I've seen them as low as like on eBay for $5 all the way up to, I don't know, $15-20. You can pick them up in the shop for around $20. Do you really want to trust your face and your hand to something like that? I don't. So that's why I say, because that's going to have a plus or minus factor, and everything always does. It's called a fudge factor. And if you're using something and you're doing something, you don't want to push the limits of everything all at once, because pushing the limits of everything all at once is just a recipe for disaster, and I don't think that's a good idea. So, you guys, vape safe. Keep your coils at, if you're going to use a mech mod, keep your coils at like a 0.3. If you're going to be using a regulated box mod, some of these will fire lower, and you can use those because those chips, like mine will tell me it's a direct short, it's shorted, it's whatever. So it's safer to use these box mods than a mech mod. And that's the reason, is because you have that chip that controls all that stuff. With everything else going on inside of it, I do not recommend these. Now, if you are going from an ego style to, say, even rebuildables, or you just want to get up higher, what I usually recommend is, hey, look, spend the money on, if you think a 30 watt device is way too much for you, get a 30 watt device, because then you'll grow into that. If you know somebody or can find somebody that'll let you use one, whatever you need to do, that has a 30 watt, and you're up there around 30 watts, and you're like, yeah, it's, you know, it's okay, I like that. You may want to go with a 50 watt, but start somewhere other than high wattage, especially on a box mod. So the IPv2, great device. You can even start there, but still, buy at least a 20 amp battery. The DNA 30s you can get away with, the Panasonics that'll have a high life rate. So batteries are rated in their amps. Those are their limits. But then you have that milliamp hour, or mAh. It's milliamp hour. That is the amount of battery life you have between charges. So the higher the number, the more time you get for vaping. Now, you can help extend that life by not pushing the amp limit. So if you run the amp limits lower, you're not draining it as high every time you fire that button. So that helps too. So you can get one of these. Like, I think I've got, let me see what I got in here. I think, yeah, I've got my Sony VTC5s in here that are 2600 milliamp hour batteries. Now, I'm vaping currently at, let's see if you can see that, 60 watts. Now, I've got a 0.3 ohm build in here. So if I had a little bit higher, I would drain those batteries a little bit less. Now, I did get a comment on one of my things from an electrical engineer who said that series in parallel, he kind of explained it a little bit different to me. on why these companies are doing it, not different. So there's two type of chips in a computer's chip for these boxes, step up and step down. Step up means that you have a battery to where if I take a single battery, that chip is making that thing run at, instead of a 4.2 volt, it can make it run on an output of say 8 volts. Okay, that's where it steps up your voltage from your battery. Now you run two batteries and you theoretically, like these within series, you're going to have 8.4 volts on a full charge. Well, that battery steps down the voltage, so you can fire a lot less voltage and it regulates it down. Now, I know that this is set at 8 or 7.6 volts. Well, if I've got like 60% battery life, I'm like right around that 6.7, 6.6 volt range. I can still get my batteries to fire well. So he was talking about it and he said, look, if you wired them in parallel, you would have to use the step up. But if you wire them in series, you run the step down. He said, and with the step downs, it's actually more efficient. With the efficiency, that means that even though that in parallel, if I have two batteries, it pulls half from this battery and half from this battery. So that's why you effectively double your amp limit and double your mAh rating or milliamp hour rating. But in series, it's like stacking the batteries and all you do is double your voltage because it pulls everything out of that and it just doubles the voltage. So he was explaining it's actually more efficient to do the series and you actually have your batteries will last longer doing it in series. I didn't know that. I thank you very much. I can't remember the name on it. Let me see if I've got it on here just real quick. But that was something that brought some new light. And he, like I said, is an electrical engineer. And thank you for that comment. I really appreciate it. His name is Solomon May. So Solomon May wrote that in. And I didn't realize in a standpoint of wiring them in series, just due to efficiency, your battery would last longer. So thanks, dude. I appreciate it. And thank you for watching. But that was a good piece of information. So it spread some light onto why these guys are doing what they're doing instead of doing step up. So cool. But back into the safety aspect, it's safer to run in parallel than in series. So these Bach mods and Mech mods aren't meant for the newest of vapors. Now, I have no problem talking to a guy about a Mech mod or a high wattage box mod, and if truly that's what their heart's set on, who am I to tell them no? Other than the fact that please be safe, because nobody wants to see anybody get hurt during this vaping. And I enjoy vaping a lot, and I think of it as a hobby and fun, and I love to help other people with it. So when a new guy comes in, I always ask, are you sure you want the Mech mod? And the one guy like yesterday was saying, yeah, I like the way the button is on it. I like the feel. All right, dude, cool. So let's figure out what you like in terms of your Mech mods and stuff like that, because there are some, a lot have this locking ring. So you hit that locking ring, your button won't fire. But if you unlock it, that's when you can fire. But there are some that don't have a locking feature. It's recessed far enough back, so if you set it straight down, it's not going to fire. Well, what happens if you put it in your pocket and there's something in your pocket that causes that to fire? You successfully just burnt the shit out of your leg, if nothing else. So we go into things like that, and I bring tips up like that. You know, look at stuff like that until you get really used to it, whatever you're going to do. But please, 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 if I build your coils or somebody else builds your coils or you want to get into coil building, really check it. Spend the extra money to get one of the ohms readers, because it'll give you a good idea of what it is, but at the same time it tells you if it's shorted. And if you stick that on a Mech mod and it's shorted, you just shorted it and you could have a huge problem in your hands instantaneously. And that's not a good idea. So add that into your vape budget. Vape safe out there, guys. Thank you for watching, and like I said, this is with the new camera. I've got a really cool review coming up on some new juice just coming out. It's just coming out on the market, just starting to hit stores, and I'm actually waiting on another email from the guy. He's supposed to be sending me some stuff, but they also said they wanted me to hold off. They have a new juice they actually want to send me to try out. So until next time, guys, vape safe and have a good one. And remember, subscribe, see what else I've got coming up. Have a good one, guys.